Welcome back to the Forge. You got just Ron and I this week. We actually have a really cool topic that we want to. Actually, it's a myriad of topics, and that we want to bring to light this week. Really, because through some workshops we've been teaching just recently for international business leaders and some of our one-on-one coaching, and it's just been everybody we're talking to. This topic of burnout keeps coming up. And we thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about that just a little bit today and go into our core purpose for this podcast, which is developing mental toughness, which we're going to clarify a little bit today on what we mean by that. But part of that developing mental toughness is about how you manage the shit that goes on in your life, right? The stress, the burnout, the lack of motivation, the frustration, the ability to be a good leader at work. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things on that in that realm today.
Yeah, as Tara said, it's you guys know this. It's prevalent right now. I get communication from my students, clients. The burnout is real. The lack of motivation is real. Some people, I'll be honest, some people are just hanging on. Right now, they're hanging on, saying, "I have no motivation to do anything." And so this is. I think this is a topic that resonates with a lot of us right now. Obviously, because of COVID. But again, as we always like to say on here, it's not just COVID. This is not a new thing. This has been around for a while. But let's talk about this idea of how do we maybe navigate burnout? How do we do better at it? Or how do we combat it? I don't know what the word is. Maybe it's manage. I don't like the word control because we're human beings and these things get off the rails sometimes, and so control feels a little. As somebody that's a recovering control freak, I don't like to use the word control. I like manage better, and so we'll talk about how do we manage that burnout. How do we? I'm not here to give you a magic bullet of how. I'm not going to tell you that I can make you be motivated every day. All right, and I think Tara would agree. All these tools are going to help most of the time, but there's just still going to be some bad days, right? There's going to be days when we don't feel like getting out of bed. And I think we need to realize that's normal. That's part of the game. And we don't want to let that become an albatross, right? We want that to be a small bump in the road, not something that sucks us into maybe a vortex where one bad day turns into a lot of bad days.
Which is your mantra. Really, you say, one bad day is okay. Maybe even 2 bad days is okay. But a lot of what we try to share with everyone through the guests and through some of our knowledge is we want to mitigate those bad days as much as possible. We want to limit them. And I think that's the key. It's not getting rid of them. It's just limiting them.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. Let's you jump right into this idea. I think you guys, if you're a regular listener, you probably have an idea, kind of our notion of what is mental toughness to us. I mean, if we look at a definition, the one that I like to use, it's a plastic personality trait, which determines in large part how individuals deal with stressors, pressure, opportunity, and challenge. And so, and this is all irrespective of the prevailing situation. So that means, as COVID visits us, we can't control that situation, but we can still have mental toughness in the face of that. So whatever fate delivers to us, we learn to, as I like to say, we dance with whatever music fate plays. And so that's mental toughness. But we also want to be very clear about our messaging on this podcast and all the work we do in webinars and teaching is that maybe a softer version of mental toughness. We want to allow for bad days. We want to allow for struggles. We want to allow for failure. These are all still part of mental toughness, and not everybody, is gonna sell that to you. There's some people out there that are in the mental toughness game that really have the messaging. They never have a bad day. They're always on. They're always strong. Our message is not that. Tara and I both have bad days, and we want to make sure that you all realize that bad days are part of the game.
Everybody we know has
Yeah,
bad days,
yeah.
right?
If they don't tell, if they don't say they have bad days, they're lying.
That's so true. Part of mental toughness, in my opinion, is also awareness. And I think, how many of you out there say, oh, I'm so burned out? I mean, I've probably said that hundreds of times in my life. I hear it from people, especially in this past year. I hear the word burnout so often. But how often do we actually know what that means? And how often, if we were to say, what do you mean burnout? You're burned out. What does that mean? What does that feel like in your body? How does that affect you throughout the day? And I think until I actually read the definition, I was like, I sometimes I don't even know when I say I feel burned out what that is or where it's coming from, or oh my gosh, how to fix it. Right. So I think that the first step to mental toughness is awareness. And with this busy world that we live in, and with a global pandemic, and with teaching kids at home, going through school, and dealing with the emotions of all of our friends and family, when do we have the time, a lot of us will ask, to sit and be self-aware? But I think the key is, if we can have that self-awareness and we can realize what's happening, we have a better chance at tackling it. And so here's the definition for burnout, and see if any of it resonates with you, right? It's a state of, get this, emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands that surround you. I don't know. Anybody else resonate with that and think, oh my gosh, I never put words to it, but yeah, that's exactly how I've felt. Oh, I don't know, for a year.
Yeah, I think the fun, well, the parts to kind of emphasize here is when we feel overwhelmed, right? We feel like we don't have the strength or the tools to deal with what life's thrown at us. That can lead to burnout. It doesn't necessarily have to, but that can lead to burnout. And I really want to emphasize this idea that it's all connected. Physical, emotional, mental, it's all connected. We're going to feel it in all those areas. And if you're mentally, emotionally burned out, you're going to feel it in your body. You're going to have fatigue. You're going to feel low on energy. All those things. That's real. That's not just in our imagination. The mind-body connection is real, and we need to make sure that we pay attention to that. And so the system is going to be fatigued. It's going to be burned out, and it's not going to perform at its highest level when we get in this state.
And, think about, we've all heard so many different, in so many different ways, how just stress, the stress of your job, the stress of a move, the stress of switching jobs, the stress of being unemployed, whatever it is, stress affects our physical or mental health, right? And 77% of Americans experience stress that does affect their physical health. 77%. Now, that's not the same in other countries. Americans are really good at stress, but 40% of Americans suffer from anxiety because of that stress. These are like heavy numbers and proven statistics around how stress can actually affect obesity and heart disease. Even they are finding research now that it's linked to Alzheimer's, right? Diabetes, of course, depression. And here's one that a lot of people don't think about. And when I started thinking about stress back in 2015, gastrointestinal problems, right? Your microbiome, how you digest food, how your digestive system is linked to your mind. And there's so much study and research to say, if you are suffering from stress, anxiety, depression, or just overwhelm and burnout, guess where you feel it first sometimes? In your stomach. And you see that when you're reaching for the Tums and the Rolaids, and you say, I can't eat that. This is a place to start. So Ron's totally right. It affects you. It's a triad, right? Mental, emotional, and physical all goes together, which is kind of scary.
It's funny you bring this up. if I, hit the rewind button to my life about 5 years ago, my routine before I went to bed was take 2 Tums and a Zantac. That was how I got through a night. So
Wow,
I
we were
had,
living the same night. We were living the same life 5 years ago.
although I'm going to tell you, Tara, I don't know really. I don't know if it's a lowering of stress levels that's helped me, but I started exercising about that time and losing weight. I learned that when I was a little overweight, which I was 5 years ago, that was when I started feeling that's when I started having to take, Zantac and Tums every night. As I've lost weight and I've become more active, I don't know which one's which. Are they both driving this mechanism? I don't. I can tell you right now, the times I take either one of those is almost never now. And so, just think about that. And I also want to go back to what Tara was saying. All those numbers that we're talking about. Let's be very clear about this. We are talking about chronic stress. Chronic stress is bad for us. And so we're going to start to change the conversation about not all stress is bad stress. There is a certain kind of stress that not only is it good for us, we're built for it. And so we want to change that conversation about stress. But I also want to go back to this idea of the definition of burnout. It's when we get overwhelmed by demands, right? And so one of the things, I got a question in one of our recent webinars from one of our students that asked, I don't really have a lot of stress in my life. It's kind of a stress-free life. And should I be looking for ways to stress myself or challenge myself so I can build that muscle? We talk a lot about this idea. We want to build your mental toughness muscle, and think of it just like a muscle, because there's a part of our brain that will grow when we practice this. And so if we are feeling overwhelmed a lot, how about we build our mental toughness? We build that muscle so we don't get as overwhelmed as normal. I'm not going to say that you'll be able to take on anything in life, but you're going to get better at this. I'm going to be honest with everybody that's listening. I am recovering from COVID right now. I don't know. I'm roughly at the time we're airing this, getting close to 3 weeks, I think, 2.5 weeks maybe in. It's a crazy disease. If you've had it, but I feel like I've weathered the storm probably better than most people because I have built my mental toughness muscle. I know what it feels like to be uncomfortable. I know what it's like to be comfortable, uncomfortable. And so as I've gone through this, and if you've gone through COVID, it's uncomfortable. And not to say that I didn't have the same discomfort that other people have, but I was able to form a story and say this is not as bad as I think it is. I didn't let it get away from me. And so, the question from one of our students is, should I look for adversity and challenges in my life? And I would say yes. You want to bring those on so that you can get tougher, so that when the storms of life come, you are much better equipped to deal with it, like me going through COVID. Now, let me just say this. Tara knows, and a lot of my close friends know. It wasn't like I was awesome. I still had my moments where I'm like, okay, this sucks. I had maybe a few whiny moments as well. But I think I got back on track quicker than most people when I started to go down that path. So I think that's what that's what our revolution is about on this podcast, is we want to say, all right, how can I get better at this so that when these things come along, I'm ready to do battle.
Well, I certainly, you did have whiny days, that's for sure. Let's not lie to
It's
our
a bad habit to break.
But what I will say,
I'm a recovering whiner.
You didn't miss a day at work that I know of, and I was shocked by that, because I'll tell you what, when I don't feel well, I'm Netflix and hot tea and hot coffee, and the world can just go away. But you were still fully working full days throughout those couple of weeks. And what I loved is your mental awareness and how you were sharing it. And I think that's probably from your training, your physical training from ultra running, and probably from baseball, and maybe even from piloting. being a pilot, you probably have to be aware of your physiological symptoms a lot and be super aware so that you can handle how to fix them. But I loved how you were bringing every day, just in our random conversations together, where you're like, so today, here's how I'm feeling with this. And my head is a little fuzzy here. And I think I need to hydrate more. And I think I need to take a nap. Like, you were really aware of how COVID was affecting you and what you needed to do to take care of yourself. I didn't feel like you were like, Tara, I'm just going to push through this and I'm going to barrel through it and I don't care. You were like, you know what? I think today is a day that I need to just let my body rest. And I think that that's mental toughness at its greatest. Not you showing up to work every day. It was you being mentally aware and adjusting. Whereas a lot of people would say, I'm not going to be weak. I'm going to push through this. I'm not, and you were like, no, today's a day I need to hydrate.
Yeah, you're talking about what you mentioned earlier. It's about self-awareness, right? And I thank you for all that. You make me sound, maybe more
Oh,
impressive
you still whined.
than I
Don't
am.
worry.
But yeah, we want to practice that self-awareness. I think that's such a key part of this. But here's the thing. Here's an example of my thought process as I was going through this. I think at one point I told Tara, I feel like I'm at about 30% capacity. I was always doing a little bit of an assessment of, okay, where am I at? Of course, that's just my assessment. I don't know, there's nothing, no metrics that I have to say that's real or not. But I was like, okay, I feel like I'm at about 30% capacity. So you can imagine trying to go through your day at 30% capacity. And what I mean, it's not just, a lot of it's cognitive, but it's also physical as well. So my training, and by the way, this is not anything special to me. This is what we're trying to, the reason we started this podcast, the reason we're passionate about this is we've tapped into this and we want all of you to tap into it as well. So my story to me was not, oh shit, I'm 30%. I'm so depleted. I can't function. I said, I'm 30%. What if I could perform at my normal level on 30% capacity? Wouldn't that be a great challenge? That's the way I looked at it. And some days I succeeded, some days I didn't. Most of my students and my clients, I was still coaching, I was still teaching, had no idea that I had COVID. I told them later in the game and they said, oh my gosh, we didn't even know. And so I think I pulled it off, at least in short stretches where I could say, okay, I can function at 100% with only 30%, of my capacity. So that was, again, instead of me dreading this and seeing it as a threat, as seeing it as a negative, I said, oh, this is going to be fun. Let's see what I can do with this challenge that I have. Certainly not a challenge I welcomed, not a challenge I wanted, but I still said, what can I do with this to kind of have fun with it and maybe, get some good out of it. And here's the thing. I feel like I'm at about 70% now, and I feel like Superman. Once you can make that happen at 30%, once you get to 70%, it's like, holy moly, this is great. And so these are all the tools that I use, and these are tools that as things come up in your life that just let's be honest, that suck. There's going to be things that suck. And we can whine about it, and we can go into negative and the negative downward spiral and despair and say life's not fair. I did have a moment of that. I had a friend that I text and I go, God, this sucks. This is not fair. But again, get out of that and change the story. Change the story. How can I look at this as actually a good thing? How can I use this as a way to get stronger?
And we're gonna go into in this podcast a couple of tips and tricks that we've used, stolen from other way smarter people on mitigating and noticing burnout and how to kind of change the story, like Ron was saying earlier, because it's incredibly powerful. So we'll share some of those. Before we get there, Ron, I want to go back really quick and ask you. I know your life changed massively 5 years ago. Put yourself back like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. Did you have the same mental toughness?
Absolutely not. And that's kind of what set me off on this journey. I think I may have shared this in a previous podcast, but it was kind of like a moment where I woke up and said, man, when I was a young man, high school, I was a high school wrestler. there's no better proving ground. You can't convince me there's any better proving ground than being a high school wrestler with mental toughness. I was tough back then. And I think, through my 20s, it started to bleed off. And then, 30s and 40s, I turned into this soft person, and I had, very minimal mental toughness. And that was kind of again, we go back to self-awareness. It finally dawned on me, although I went through a lot of my life not even realizing that I was slipping into this. And I also didn't realize that slipping into this mode of being, usually in the literature, you're going to hear it called mentally sensitive, not mentally weak. But I didn't realize I was slipping into being mentally sensitive. And I also didn't realize the cost of that. And so the self-awareness, I just one day woke up. And sometimes we have a catalyst, right? I'll be honest. I was breaking off an engagement. There was a lot of catalysts that maybe call it a midlife crisis. I don't like that word, but a midlife awakening. I don't know. There was some things in my life that triggered this, but I also had to have that self-awareness to say, wait a minute, is this the person I want to be? Am I proud of who I am right now? And that was me opening my eyes to, no, I wasn't proud. And I wasn't happy that I had become so soft. And then I started down the road. And it was a hard journey to build that mental toughness back up. But you all can do it. Many of the things we talk about and our amazing guests, you see it from all walks of life, on this podcast, right? Just such a diversity of guests that have done hard things, that have figured it out, and have found fulfillment. And if you like the word happiness, they found happiness. I like fulfillment better, but they found that through doing hard things. And that's our message here is don't shy away from that. Actually embrace the hard things. And so, I don't know, Tara, do you have a similar story of, did you ever go through, a mode of life where you started to get maybe soft? Because, in your military background, holy moly, you had to be mentally tough with all those things you did. And
It was a different kind of mental toughness, Ron. That was adapt, overcome, and compartmentalize your entire life so that you can push forward. That was the David Goggins version of mental toughness back then. I would. I'd say I had two probably massive changes in life. One was leaving the military at the age of 32, and know that I was not a combat-oriented military person. I was a television journalist, so that sounds a little fluffy, but I was thrown into a lot of combat situations with my video camera and my microphone trying to cover the story. So I got to see it. I didn't participate in it, but I got to be in it and see it, which is a very unique experience. And so you get to see what people are going through. Not just the soldiers that you're there to do a story on, but the civilians in these countries. And there are a million levels of mental toughness going on between all of these people and yourself. But I think back then you compartmentalize a lot. And so one of my big life shifts was leaving the military and realizing I didn't have to compartmentalize and push through struggles or pain, but I could actually take time to become self-aware. That's an interesting mountain to climb when you decide to become self-aware. Let me tell you.
Did you feel like you had to hold that in, show no weakness?
Absolutely. And part of that's military training, which makes a lot of sense. If you're going to experience the life that the military provides you, even outside of wartime, it is necessary, in my opinion. It is necessary for some of that conditioning. And it works really, really well. But it's only necessary in that environment. It's not necessary once you leave that military environment. But
right,
yes,
let's unpack this.
You need it in the military.
Let's unpack this. Right now I'm doing a challenge that some of you probably are familiar with. It's I think the challenge actually is do 22 push-ups a day for 22 days, something like that, for veteran suicide. And I'm doing that with some friends of mine. I'm not hitting every day because of my COVID taking me out of commission, but I'm doing my best. And so this is a real thing, right? Veteran suicide is a real thing. And so I wonder if there's a connection here of tamp down those feelings, don't show emotion, And is there a connection with veteran suicide? And so I talk to my students all, you got to let it out. We talk about emotions. I just did a lecture with my students talking about emotions. And so when do we show it? When do we hold it back? I think, and this is going to start to get into the world of emotional intelligence. And
Absolutely.
so, but I very much, very strongly counsel my students, find a way to let it out. Suppressing your emotions, we probably know this, is not healthy. Now, in a moment where maybe it's a crisis situation, combat situation, you're going to suppress that because it's not going to be helpful. There's such thing as emotional contagion. And if you panic, people around you are going to panic. So we know this from a lot of psychology and neuroscience. But after that moment is over, you got to find a way to get it out. You got to get it out. And so I don't know about you, Tara, but one of the best ways for me to do that is journaling. Some other ways that I would recommend is talking to a friend, get it out that way. Talking to a therapist. I had a student say, I asked my students, I go, what's a great way to do this? And he almost wanted to apologize. Well, maybe you go see a therapist. I'm like, no, maybe, no apologizing. There's nothing wrong with that. I've gone to a therapist. I would go to a therapist again. Sometimes we need that. So journaling, talk to a close friend. Therapy is a great way. Exercise is a great way. But find a way to discharge that emotion, because we don't want to bottle it up and carry it around. We know from all kinds of research that is not good for our health. And so I don't know, Tara, if did you have a way to discharge that? And number one, and number two, did you feel like it was weighing you down if you bottled it up?
No, I mean, I wasn't aware. I was in the military from 20 to 32 years old. And these are difficult years to be self-aware anyway. And everything is about the experience and just doing, and sleep, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. Not important. Sleep is not important. Sleep when you're dead. You don't sleep when you're young. And so, I wasn't self-aware of any of the problems it was causing me. And I know, to answer your question, I did not have a way to release. I think I did that through extreme sports, rock climbing or surfing or scuba diving. And I was always searching for the adrenaline rush. And I think that might have been my unaware release. But no, this is where the military fails. And this is a whole other podcast. This is where the military fails. They teach you to compartmentalize and hold it in, which again, I say is very important for that job, but they do not teach you how to release. They don't teach you while you're in uniform how to release, and they certainly do not teach you how to release when you leave the military. And this goes back to your veteran suicide. Veterans, we don't actually know why people commit suicide because they're no longer really around to tell us. But I can tell you from working with veterans and listening to them, having gone through some of the emotions that they share myself, when you're taught very, very well to bottle up your emotions, which I have some friends currently that have been taught to bottle their emotions and they never stepped foot in the military. When you're taught to do that, and it is now your habitual way of doing things, if you don't have a way to release, you will find illness. You will find problems in relationships. You will find dissatisfaction in life, and you won't know why. And that's what happens to a lot of military veterans. They leave this conditioning with no way to release and become different. And it's very mentally confusing. And so they don't. But the veterans that do overcome this do it through journaling and therapy. They do it through volunteering. I know a lot of veterans that go on to be firefighters or, work with animals or, work in farming. These things are very therapeutic. And I don't think it's just for veterans. Like I said, I've got a friend right now who's learned his entire life how to bottle his emotions. And I think some of these therapy areas could help there as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to say, but I noticed you said he. we're
Oh,
taught.
I know women
I
friends
come from a
as well.
generation. If anybody knows my age, I'm getting up there a little bit. I come from a generation. Big boys don't cry, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
We don't show tears. We don't show emotion. We don't show weakness or softness or any of that. That's what we're taught as young boys. By the way, when I ask my students, okay, what is a good way to discharge emotion? One of my young male students said, sometimes I cry. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I do too. All right. I do too. I'll put it right out there. I'm not afraid. In fact, a lot of my friends say I am a crier. I really used to be self-conscious about that as a younger man. And now I own it. I own it. And,
Right? Yeah.
there's
Why
nothing
not?
wrong. It's a great discharge, by the way, of if you want to get those emotions out. Sometimes a good cry is what we need. I don't know that it's always the solution, but you'll know when it's time, and don't feel bad about that. So, yeah, we get this messaging that we need. And again, I know I'm generalizing and saying it's usually with young men. And it's not serving us well. So this is not just a conversation about veteran suicide. This is a conversation for all of us. This is a conversation about burnout. This is a conversation about taking care of our mental health. That's what this is about. So, although it can go down the road and be, a discussion about veteran suicide, which is real and important, it's a discussion that I think we all need to have. And so Tara talked about this idea of sleep. How do we sleep? One of the things you're probably thinking already, all right, I'm on board. Burnout is not a good thing. And I feel burned out what do I do about it? So let's start to kind of give you some tools that both Tara and I use that might be new to you, hopefully. Maybe not, but let's talk about some of these. One of them is sleep. And we have this idea, especially in the United States, especially if you're young, that, as Tara said, if you remember, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I actually have said that saying as well, especially when I was a younger man. Sleeping is a waste of time, and if
Oh
you
yeah,
want
me
to,
too.
you want to get to the top and make your million. At least when I was young, it was make your million. Now it's probably make your 10 million. I don't know. If you want to do all of that, you want to start reducing the time you sleep. And oh my goodness, is that not a good approach? And I know that's a tough sell for the younger generation, but I tell my students all the time, get your sleep. And so what happens when we sleep? It's a very active process. Many people don't know. It's a very active process in our brain. A lot of people think when we go to sleep, our brain goes to sleep, and it just either stops doing anything, or it's very much in a hibernation kind of a state. And it's absolutely not true. It's a very active process. We are consolidating the things we learn throughout the day. That happens when we sleep. There's some toxic neurochemicals that build up in our brain. As we go through the day, it's almost like all of these pathways in our brain get clogged up with, I'm not going to get into neuroscience here, but it gets clogs up with a lot of crap, right? And so as we sleep, that clears it. There's a fluid that circulates through our brain that clears it all out and gets us prepared for our next day. And so I like to look at it as, if you want to think of it as a Zamboni on the ice. So if you go to a hockey game and you watch the skaters chop up the ice with their skates, and it gets all, it's rough and all those things. And then the Zamboni comes out and smooths it all out. And now you're ready for, to chop it all up again. So as you sleep at night, think of that as your Zamboni, maybe smoothing over your ice, your brain, getting it ready for the rest of the game. And so as we get up in the morning, we're recharged, ready to go. And there are just all kinds of things that come out of that: better decision making, less violence. We don't get as upset with people. We're less negative. On and on. I could give you a whole slew of things that happen when we're low on sleep. And some of you, if you're paying attention, know this, right? When you're low on sleep, do you seem to be short with your temper? Do you have more arguments maybe with your significant other? Are you more irritable? Are you more agitated? Why are we agitated? What's agitation? It's a stress response. So we're low on sleep. That's a stressor for our body. Now we become agitated in response to that. So all of these things, a lot of people don't realize. They go through life getting 3-4 hours of sleep, and they don't understand why they're quick to get upset. They only see the negative in life, and just all these things that's going on, and they're not even making the connection that all they need to do to fix this is get more sleep. Isn't that crazy?
It is, and it's funny, and so many people still don't believe it, even though there's all the scientific research that's like been out for the last couple of years to prove how important sleep is. And it's not even just, okay, yeah, it's taking care of my body, but I don't have time to do that right now. It's kind of the people that say, and I say people, I do this even with things today. I will totally start working out, just not yet. I don't have time right now. Or I will totally start hiking every single Saturday, but not this month. I'll take care of myself. I'll start eating better. I promise. I just need to get through these next 3 weeks that are super busy first. So I totally get how we can do the same thing with sleep, except think of it in a different way. If that's you, if you say, that's all great, but that's taking care of me, and that's my least concern right now. I've got kids, I've got work, I've got COVID, I've got this. Think of it in this way instead. Don't think of sleep as taking care of yourself. Think of sleep as, if you get the right amount, scientifically proven, by the way, you're better at taking care of your kids. You're better at your job. You're better at the work you're doing. You're more creative. You are going to surpass the person who's in line with you for a promotion. You're going to be a better significant other. You're going to be a better friend and community member. Think of it like that, because sometimes we don't always want to take care of ourselves. But if taking care of everything else around us is more important, tell yourself that story. And it makes me think of, deep work. If you've heard this, there's a ton of research and books out on deep work, or the 4-hour work week, right? If we really focus well for a few hours, we get more done than if we work hard on 18 different projects throughout the day. If we focus on one thing for a few hours, we're so much better than if we focus on 18 things for a few hours. We're more productive. Think of sleep in that sense. And we talked about this in a fabulous podcast. I think it was podcast number 5 with John Fitch, right? Creating a rest ethic to match your work ethic. He has a great book out there called Time Off. Right. And this all goes hand in hand with time off is not just about taking vacations. Time off is about really recharging so that you can actually be 10 times better at everything you do all day. And if we get 5 hours of sleep, we all plug our cell phones in, right? Every day we plug our cell phone into the wall because of why? Because it has to recharge. When do we do that for ourselves? Why don't we do that? We deplete our battery life as well, which means we start functioning at lesser strength, at lesser, slower speed. So when we plug ourselves back in at night for the 8 hours, the same as our cell phone needs, we actually function better the next day with everything we do. Forget about the fact that you're taking care of your mind and body, right? We actually are better. Think about it when you are only on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Isn't the next day hell versus an 8-hour sleep? So that's how I like to look at it sometimes.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, "Well, I can do this. I'm used to it, right?" And people will push back on me and say, "Yeah,
I only need 5 hours.
I only need 4 or 5 hours, and I've been doing this for years." And I would say, you are in a diminished state, and you don't even realize it. You've been doing it so long, you have no idea what you're capable of. Mm-hmm. I would say, let's practice. Let's do a thought experiment, and let's get you 8 hours of quality sleep a night, and let's see if your performance goes up. I can almost guarantee it will. There's nothing that points to this idea that you're going to perform better on less sleep than more. Now, we can't go too far. I want to be very careful about this, that there is evidence to say that too much sleep is not good either. We want to, quite honestly, all the research that I've seen is 7 to 9 hours, usually skewing towards 7 to 8 hours. And everybody's just a little bit different. But I try to make sure I do not go under 7 hours unless it's a very special occasion. Every now and then, life gets in the way and I get a little bit less. But I would say 98% of the time, I get 7 hours of sleep every single night. And I try to make it quality sleep. And there's things that you can do to set yourself up for quality sleep. I like to get away from screens at least an hour before bedtime. I have a routine that I go through before I go to bed. I don't sleep with my phone next to me, little things like that. Certainly I use a weighted blanket. I pay a little extra for a nice mattress. I like to keep my room cool. These are all things that I've experimented with throughout my life to make the sleep environment more conducive to getting into good quality sleep. And you can play around with these and see what works with you. Some people like to really make sure all light. You have a very dark bedroom. All light is kind of extinguished. That doesn't bother me as much, but you can play around with that. So I guess where I want to go with this is like Tara said, not only the sleep thing, but self-care. If you don't like that idea of self-care, if that's weakness to you, like Tara said, change the story to say, I'm going to perform at a higher level if I can take care of that. Here's the thing. We get so wrapped up in this idea of quantity over quality. We think
gosh.
if I want to conquer the world, working 20 hours a day is going to get me a lot further down that path than 6 hours a day. Makes sense, right? How in the world could you tell me, are you going to convince me that I can do as much good work in 6 hours as I can in 20? No way, Ron. Well, I'm going to tell you that the research says that absolutely. We drop off. We don't even get to 8 hours, where our productivity starts to drop off before we even get to 8 hours. In fact, I think, and I don't know, Tara, if you know this, but I think it's around 6 hours where we start to peak. And so between 6 hours and 20 hours, if you continue to work, all you're doing is going downhill. And is that the way you want to, number one, spend your life? And number two, you're not getting as much done as you think you are.
You're wasting time.
Yeah.
Is what you're doing.
So
You're not
look
being
at quality.
productive.
Yeah. Quality over quantity.
And where do we see this the most, Ron? This is a great way to put it into perspective, is with coaching entrepreneurs, startup companies, right? You got two co-founders that are building an app or a company. They're usually in their 20s or 30s. Sometimes they're in their 40s or 50s, but they're typically in their, mid to late 20s and early 30s. And they're working 80, 90 hours a week. And guess what? The ones that are working 80 or 90 hours a week, and tell me I don't know what happens in your one-on-one coaching, but I'm sure it's the same as mine. We hear but I've got to work 15 hours today. I've got to work that for the next, 3 years.
7 days a week.
7 days a week. And I got divorced because my wife wouldn't put up with it. And I say wife because we coach mostly male entrepreneurs. And I'm not spending time with my kids, or gosh, I can't remember the last time I went camping. I used to love to do that. Here's the thing. These are the companies that we see sitting stagnant and not scaling and not going places most of the time. They're stuck. Why can't we get funded? We've been fundraising for 3 years. That's a problem. Why can't we can't get the clients. We can't get the customers. We can't. And my thought is, you're burned out. You have not charged your battery, and so you're operating at 20%. Do you see that with your clients?
Oh gosh, I have a story of one of my clients that fits all of what you just talked about, and actually somebody that we both know that got shingles. And the first thing I said to him in my coaching session, I go, what's a kind of a driver? It's not always, but a driver of shingles is stress. And so we started talking about, okay, what do you do to release the pressure valve? What do you have anything in place? He was working long hours, 7 days a week kind of thing. And he said, and I don't want to make fun I'm not making fun of him, but I had to chuckle when he said, well, I try to find time to go to the gym, but I carry my phone with me. And I said, wow. So that is your moment to recharge, is you go to the gym, but you have to have your phone with you. I go, what would happen if you went to the gym and you actually left that phone in the locker? What would that look like? He looked
Oh
at me
my
like I
God.
was crazy.
Like you were crazy.
Yeah, I got to be available every minute of every day. And I go, is that true?
No.
What would happen if maybe you were offline for 45 minutes or, half hour? I told him, I go, we got to find a time frame where here's the thing. And I think that he didn't realize this until we started talking about it. Having that phone on you is a stressor.
Oh my
All right.
gosh.
Just even if
Totally.
nothing happens on that phone while you're carrying it around, it's a stressor, especially if you're somebody trying to start a business. So just having that with you can be a stressor. And so these are the little subtle things that I think people don't get. We need to unplug from that. We need to get away from that. And so what's happening here is you are sympathetically activated. And I don't want to go too far into the neuroscience here, but this is your sympathetic nervous system. This is the part of our nervous system that controls fight or flight. And so when we are sympathetically activated by chronic stressors, we see everything in the world as a threat. And we had Patrick Sweeney. We had a previous guest, Patrick Sweeney, that,
I was
in his
just
30s,
thinking about Patrick.
in his 30s, he's building companies, he's building empires and making his millions and driving fancy cars and flying around in private jets, all that stuff. But he was a mess, not only from the stress, but bad diet. Let's talk about that in a minute here, but he wasn't eating well. He was drinking too much. And oh, by the way, he got leukemia. Thankfully,
And he blames it on that stress.
yeah, thankfully survived. But and he would agree, and I think he's on the right path, that his lifestyle created that cancer in him. And if I think Tara said it, if you keep abusing your health, it will catch up to you one day. And is that where we want to, is that how we want to live our life? Do we want to manifest cancer in us, even if we survive? Is that worth building your empire? Is that worth, I'll sleep when I'm dead? I don't know. To me, it's the calculus is not there. It's not there. And I know a lot of people just don't want to buy into that, but take care of yourself, whether it's through sleep, nutrition, hydration. We haven't talked about that, but those are things that we need to look at. And how often do we just ignore that?
Totally want to talk about nutrition and hydration before we get into talking about the mentalness. We've been talking a lot about physical with sleep and recharging, but we definitely want to talk about the mental and emotional side of burnout as well. First, though, let me just say, following up with what Ron said, Patrick Sweeney has an amazing story, and he was podcast number 19 for us, but he has a great book out there called Fear is Fuel. Check that out. He left the startup world, got better from leukemia. The guy has hiked some of the tallest mountains on the planet. He's raising his kids in the most amazing way and teaching them mental toughness and strength and resilience. Just a great story. Check him out. Fear is Fuel. And before we move on to nutrition and hydration, which is like a really fun topic for me, let me give you, and I'm totally pulling this from one of my newer favorite books, which is by Ariana Huffington. She has, from the Huffington Post, she has a new book that just released couple weeks ago called Your Time to Thrive. And her first book really goes into, she was standing at her desk. I think she was in her 40s and all of a sudden passed out, hit her head, cracked it open on her desk, fell down. And it took her going into the hospital to realize that she wasn't sleeping, eating, or taking care of herself. And she almost died. That created a movement for her to start learning more about taking self-care. She started becoming hugely known for self-care of her employees, or not self-care, but promoting self-care to her employees. And this is her whole mantra in life right now. And this book is very specifically written around COVID, in my opinion. She brings it up quite a bit. It's super good and has a ton of action steps. Rather than just talking about the problem, she gives you some great new ways to change habits. And I'm just going to give you a taste from her chapter on sleep, which is fabulous. She brings in a lot of famous people, Tom Brady is in this chapter about how these people have become self-aware and how it's changed their lives. But at the end of every chapter, she has a little section called Microsteps. That's the theme of this book, is microsteps, because we never want to change habits. Ron, I know you have strong feelings on this and New Year's resolutions, which I hate. We never want to change habits in big, giant ways because we always fail. We almost always fail. And then that's really disheartening. And then we don't want to do it anymore, right? I'm going to lose 20 pounds New Year's Day, and it doesn't happen within the first 3 weeks, so we quit. How about just saying, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk every day? That's a lot more achievable. Microsteps is scientifically proven to be the way to change habits. And her microsteps for sleeping better, because a lot of us struggle to even fall asleep, right? First of all, get the TVs out of your bedroom. Let me just tell you that I've never had a TV in my bedroom for this specific reason. It's terrible. It's the worst thing you can do. And now it's our phones.
Wait a minute. Do we have to have a TV in every bedroom or every room?
Only in America.
Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. I'm laughing, but there are people that have a TV in every room.
Unbelievable. Americans are the only ones that do that. But your device before you go to bed, I put mine on airplane mode. I've only been doing that for maybe about a year and a half. If you are still allowing your body to wake up in the middle of the night because you hear your text message or LinkedIn or Facebook notification go off, oh my gosh, please stop.
Turn those off.
Turn that. Oh my God, that's terrible. There's nothing that is, don't be a slave to your phone, for Pete's sakes. Like, love yourself enough to say, no, I have this boundary. So turning your device off, she even suggests putting it outside of your bedroom. I don't do that. I just put it on airplane mode. Set an alarm 30 minutes before you go to bed to say, enough with the phone, no more social media. Literally, the reminder reminds you to stop and start kind of your night routine, whatever that is. Take a bath.
It's a transition for your brain.
It's a transition.
You got to let that brain start to move from I'm awake and I'm going and I'm stimulated, and now I want to transition into let's prepare my brain for sleep. And so I use an hour. Ariana says half hour, but experiment with what works for you.
Sleep apps. I have a sleep app called Sleep Cycle, which is kind of fun. It's gamified sleep for me, and I get to do a sleep audit. It's the first thing I look at after I get out of bed and shower. I'm like, let me see how my sleep audit went for last night. It's just kind of fun. And it motivates me to get better sleep. As I'm holding my coffee up right now at 10 o'clock in the morning, my time, set a caffeine cutoff. I lived in Europe for so many years where we drank espresso after dinner. That was just the way it is. So caffeine doesn't really affect me past a certain time of night, but most people it does. And so if it does, set a cutoff. Otherwise, that's going to keep you up until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Making your bedroom a sanctuary of quiet. Ron, you said that you like to keep your room cool. It's actually one of her microsteps with proof that actually lets you stay asleep. How many of you wake up in the middle of the night overheated, right? Your body will wake you up if the temperatures are too hot. You can get into doing things like reading before you go to sleep. That always puts me to sleep. Chamomile or lavender tea.
Some people
meditating.
Some people will meditate.
And then here's a new one I've been doing. So I'm pro gratitude journaling. We talked about this with some of our business leaders in our recent webinar this week. I'm pro gratitude journaling, but I realize that no matter what country you live in, people still view gratitude journaling as a 1970s hippie thing to do. Oh, I'm a flower child, so grateful for whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's so yoga, it's so guru. I don't think of it that way. I really don't. I think of it as rewiring your brain, right? We talk a lot about changing the narrative, changing the story, taking control over your thoughts. When you go to bed freaking out about anything, parenting the next morning, about the meeting that you are, the presentation you have, about all the emails that you didn't get to, about how am I going to pay for the kids' college. When you go to bed thinking like that, you are totally screwing yourself for a good night's sleep and for the next day. And it just perpetuates. It goes on and on and on and on. Right. I know people that have night and morning anxiety, like panic attacks when they go to sleep and when they wake up in the morning because of these stressors. That is nothing but the story in your head, and you are allowing that anxiety to unfold. I say just change the narrative to what was so awesome today? What am I excited about tomorrow? It's kind of tricking your brain. So gratitude journaling to me is tricking your brain. It actually puts me to sleep and I wake up feeling great. So try it. Just, if you think it's weird, don't tell anybody about it. Just make it your own special secret.
Yeah, I used to be the guy that thought that was all touchy-feely crap. And let's just start with this. Tara is right on. I've read a lot of research on gratitude. Overwhelmingly, is it effective? And so what it's doing, I mean, there's some good things. Number one, so it's easy. It's easy to do. For a long time, I did a gratitude journal. I still practice gratitude, but I don't do it in quite the formal way because I think I've trained myself to look for it. Here's something that may surprise you. Our neurobiology is not designed for gratitude. Our neurobiology is to look for threats in our environment. That is what it's trying to do. So it's always on the lookout for the negative, right? That's why we gravitate toward news headlines that are negative. All of the things that we get sucked into usually
Gossip.
are negative things. And we're just, it's like our brain is drawn to that. Well, I mean, let's not be too critical of our brain. It's trying to keep us alive. And so that's its job, is say, look for threats, look for threats, look for threats. We want to start to change that. We can change that. And so we want to develop a new habit. And that's where gratitude journaling comes in. There's two things that are going to happen when you start gratitude journaling. Number one, you're going to focus on the good things in your life. And if you have breath in your lungs, there's something good in your life. All right. If you say, well, my life sucks and I don't have nothing to be grateful for, I'm going to say, try harder. Because there's something there. If you're still breathing, you have something to be grateful for. So number one, it's going to teach you to focus not only in the moment on gratitude, but when you do a gratitude journal, let's say, I do this every morning. When I used to do it, it was every morning. And as I went through my day, I go, okay, what am I going to put in my gratitude journal tomorrow? So I was on the lookout all through my day of what can I write in my journal that I'm grateful for. So it's not only helping you as you write it down in your journal, but it's helping you throughout the day. And in time, this becomes a habit. Now, instead of looking for the negative, we're looking for the positive. We're looking for what is great going on right now. And just to hammer this point home, I had one of my students ask me, he said, how, sometimes I get off the cuff questions, and I love this for my students, but he says, how do you get through a bad day, Professor Durant? And I'd never been asked that before. And without hesitation, I said, gratitude. When gratitude really becomes powerful is when you're having a shitty day, stop. Just stop, pause, and say, what can I be grateful for right now? Even if it's just, taking a breath of sweet air into my lungs, I can say, I'm healthy. I just took a breath. I'm still alive. I'm still in the fight. Maybe that's all you need. And that will make you, it won't solve your problems. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all, but it's going to elevate your mood. I promise you, if you can find something to be grateful for, it will elevate your mood. And so I'm with Tara. This is a big one. Practice this. Again, the reason I don't do it now is because I feel like I've programmed myself. I go throughout the day looking for things to be grateful for. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes on a really bad day, it's a little tough, but you can do it. You can do it. You can find something out there to be grateful for.
Easier than you think,
and I hope you guys are following. This is an antidote to burnout. Okay. I hope you guys are seeing the connection here. This is one of the great tools for working with burnout and maybe kind of heading that off.
And I got to put out there, because I think I was victim to this many years ago. We are not victim to burnout. We are not, something is not happening to us. I'm so burned out because, my boss is making me work so hard. I'm so burned out because my home life is a mess. I'm so burned out because COVID is ruining everything on the planet. We are not victim to this. We are victimizing ourselves. And I know that sounds really harsh. I have been guilty so many times. We are victimizing ourselves in letting that narrative burn us out. And so everything we're talking about here is how do we change the narrative? How do we become more aware so that we are no longer a victim to it? We are in control. We are managing. We are in control of, the world is crumbling around me. Amazingly enough, I am not burned out. Versus the person standing right next to us going through the exact same thing, that is that person, that just whines and complains and bitches all day, bringing everybody else around them down. And they just kind of hate everything. And they eat McDonald's because they just don't care, and they don't get any sleep, and they wake up and they just make everybody's life a nightmare, to include their own, right? It's just narrative. And so we now want to talk really quick about, before we get into mental and emotional side of burnout, the physical aspect that is not about narrative, which is nutrition, exercise, and hydration. The things that we put off because we just don't think they're that important. Except I have been horrible, still am, very bad at hydrating. My entire family is this way. I have now had to set an alarm on my phone to tell me to hydrate throughout the day. My sister has to wear a Fitbit that tells her to hydrate throughout the day, because hydration completely alters our mental state. Isn't it crazy to think that not hydrating can cause depression? Not hydrating can cause you to be angry. These things are true. And not hydrating, think about it, your brain needs water. And if we don't put water, when I'm starting to feel a little off and I'm like, God, I can't concentrate, I go and down 2 glasses of water. I know that's what's going on. Do you ever feel this, Ron, with hydration? Or you race a lot. Do you find that hydrating versus not hydrating makes a difference?
Yes, I'm about the most reluctant person. This idea, I'm gonna push back a little bit here, of all of these rules of thumbs out there. Drink 8 glasses of 8-ounce, glasses, 64 ounces, or what is the other
half
one
your
here?
body weight
Yeah,
in ounces.
1 ounce for every kilogram or something.
Yep.
I'm like, I've done this, and I'm peeing every 17 minutes. And I go, this cannot be normal. My ancestors did not drink, 178 ounces of water a day. You can't convince me that that's normal, and that should be what we're doing. But I'm starting to slowly get on board with this idea. I mean, one of the biggest drivers of fatigue is dehydration.
Oh, totally.
And so if you're not, you're feeling like your energy levels are going down, drink some water. As Tara said, if you can't concentrate, maybe it could be food. But it could be just a matter of getting some water in you. I know if I get really dehydrated, I'm going to get a headache. And I can almost always, if I feel that coming, that headache's coming on, and I think it's because I'm dehydrated, I can drink some water. I don't need Advil. I don't need Tylenol. I just drink some water and it goes away. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
We don't need drugs a lot of times. We just need to take care of ourselves by drinking enough water. So I'm going to leave it to you to decide what enough water is. I just don't. I think all these rules of thumbs, number one, they never take into account, a 270-pound guy versus a 110-pound woman. It's always just this guideline that says, okay, drink this much water. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't fit. That doesn't make sense. So think about, what that, but you're going to know, pay attention. You're going to feel better when you're more hydrated, when you're getting good food in you. I like to always tell people, our brains use how much of our daily calories does our brain use? This little thing between our ears, roughly about 2 to 3 pounds. It's not very, the mass of our brain compared to the rest of our body is very small, but it uses roughly about 20% of the calories we burn in a day. All right. It's very energy hungry. It needs good food. And so when you're suffering from, again, you're not thinking straight, you're not making good decisions, think about water and think about food. Now, again, the brain likes glucose. So just be careful with this idea of, okay, Ron, glucose, isn't that what's in a Snickers? Well, yeah, that's not what you want to eat.
Not the same kind of glucose we're talking about here.
It'll help, but that's not what I'm talking about when I say good food. And by the way, a lot of people do that. They reach for some sugar to pick me up, but there's all kinds of mechanisms that say that's not good. We're going to get a pick me up for a short amount of time, and then we're going to go into a down period. So just realize we want to get some good food in us. We want to take care of that system. Again, this is all driven toward not only burnout, but also if we want to perform at our best level, we need to do these things. And then, I don't even want to get into the whole training thing, Tara. Yes. That's maybe a different podcast, and I feel like we don't want to go down that path, but absolutely my performance when I'm running is way better when I'm well hydrated. I can see my heart rate at a lower level. All the metrics that I look for performance are much better when I'm well hydrated, and I can see it like night and day. But again, that's another podcast that maybe, I don't know, maybe we explore that at some point.
Well, and we all hear, eat healthier, eat this way, don't eat that way. I've actually taken it to the extreme in the last 5 years to solve my own health issues. I think I have probably about 2 PhDs without the PhD in nutrition. And it's fascinating to me. It's a really fun hobby to learn about how genuinely nutrition affects the body. And there's a great book out there. Ron and I have both I listened to it on audiobook. I'm not sure if you read it or listened to it, but it's by Aubrey Marcus, who I just love, called Own the Day, Own Your Life. And there's just some fun stuff in there. He's super funny, from how to have great sex to how to drink a bulletproof coffee in the morning. But he gets into the science of food and nutrition, which I love in a super fun way. So if you want like an introductory and some habit changing things that are fun, Aubrey Marcus, we'll put it in show notes, Own the Day, Own Your Life. For me, I think the way I think of it, I love thinking about things scientifically, right? So I'm a big food grower, which we may have talked about in previous podcasts. I grow enough food to feed definitely myself about 9 months out of the year, and probably about 6 of my neighbors. So I grow a lot of food.
I was thinking you could feed Costa Rica, but
it's fun for me. It's kind of my way of meditating, right? And I just love doing it, but I love figuring out the science of it. And you think about it this way, right? If you've ever grown anything, even a plant inside your house, you've heard NPK, right? The initials for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. If your plants start having issues, their leaves turn yellow, their stems are thin and weak, they start getting brown spots, too many bugs all of a sudden are eating this tomato plant, but not that tomato plant. It's amazing how geeked out, if you go onto these weird forums with gardeners, how geeked out some people are. And I'm a little bit of that geek, but there are people way more geeked out than me.
As soon as you said NPK, you lost me.
Well, plants need a soil that is, and all the plants are different, right? Some of them need an alkaline soil, some need acidic soil, some need medium between alkaline and acidic. Some of them need a lot of nitrogen. They need a lot of nitrogen at certain points of their growth stages. If you give them too much nitrogen, you'll kill them. It's this really fancy dance of nutrients, right? Our bodies are the same way. If plants die with not enough nutrients or the wrong nutrients, right? They have problems. They get sick. They get cancers. They die.
So you telling me if I eat McDonald's every day, that's not good?
That's probably not going to get you anywhere, Ron. And I'm going to go back to any of you that take Tums. Please ditch the Tums. I know that they help in the moment. You are killing your body. Do a little bit of research on why Tums. Just Google, why are Tums bad for me?
Oh, just yeah.
So bad.
Does that mean
So
I'm gonna
bad.
die? I think I ate those like candy for way too many years.
You would have noticed all the problems happening.
Oh,
But yes, so think of it that way. Think of nutrition and water as if we didn't water and nutritionize our plants, if that's a word, they would die and have cancers. We're the same way.
yeah, that's good stuff. And that garden, I've said it more than once. It's just amazing. It looks like a professional did it.
I
The
am a
first time I seen
professional,
it, I
Ron.
just went, "Holy!" It's so cool. It's beautiful and it's huge, and I can see why it's relaxing to you. Yeah, anybody that's done some gardening or just tried at a house plant, it can be very rewarding or very frustrating. There's a lot of people out there who say, "Yeah, I kill everything that I bring into my house," and sometimes I feel like that's me. So, we're running out of time here. Guys, this has been fun. I hope you guys are picking up some things. We were going to talk a little bit. We talked about the mental side of it a little bit with gratitude. And we talked a fair amount about reframing the story. That's going to be in the category of maybe the mental side of it, and how we can work to combat burnout. But then there's the emotional side. So you wanna look for opportunities to get some play into your life and maybe some creativity. I do paint my number right now, and this has been a new thing with COVID. I never did it before, and I absolutely love it. I always felt like there was an artist within me with no talent, and I still kind of believe that. So paint by number is a great way for me because I have no talent, but I still feel like I'm becoming this. Maybe I'm playing the part of an artist. So it's been fun to do that. Maybe you look for things, whether it's playing a musical instrument or whatever, to unplug from the technology and the doom scrolling, the social media. Get away from those screens and do something where you're painting or maybe it's pottery, something creativity or creative like that. Maybe it's writing. I'm writing a book right now. So that can be something as well. And I always feel like when I do that, I feel recharged. And so I try to, build that into my day where I'm going to say, okay, and I put it into my schedule. Okay, this is my hour for painting. And by the way, I like to throw that in between cognitive, heavy lifting. So if I got to grade some papers for an hour, and then I say, okay, now I'm going to take an hour to paint, and then I'm going to go back to grading papers. I do things like that to cycle between stress and rest for my brain. Stress and rest, as you've probably heard me talk about on this podcast, stress plus rest equals growth. We need to have stress and rest. Not all stress is bad. We started this podcast saying chronic stress is bad. We want to avoid that. But transient, moderate stress is good. Transient means it comes and it goes, right? So we want to be able to turn it off, go from a cycle of a stress load. Hopefully it's a moderate stress load. Then we go to rest, and then we do it again. It's almost like we're at the gym, right? And we're doing repetitions to build our muscle. We want to do the same thing where we turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. That is actually good for us. We are well built for this. Do not avoid stress in your life. There is such thing as good stress. It's called eustress, if you want to look that up. Eustress as opposed to distress. These are the two kinds of stress that we're talking about. We want to avoid distress as much as we can, and we also want to avoid chronic stress. We need to find moments to turn off that stress load, to turn off the sympathetic nervous system that I talked about earlier, to turn off the threat mode. We want to be able to cycle between that, and we need to. Otherwise, we're gonna go down the path of burnout. We're gonna go down the path of being unmotivated, and just all those negative things that do not help us perform at our best level. And so, think about ways to do that. So, play and creativity are big ones. Make sure that you're working on your relationships. I know that's hard during COVID, but make sure you're spending time to cultivate your relationships. I know some people that will set reminders to say, every week I want to reach out to one of my friends and just touch base with them. So do something like that if you need to, and then tap into purpose and meaning. So I don't know, Tara, I just threw some things out there. What are your thoughts on any of those? Maybe you have some things that you want to share.
Yeah, I love the calendaring, right? It sounds maybe a little disconnected or unemotional because we should just want to do these things, right? Repair.
We get busy though, right?
But we get busy. But you know what? Here's the thing. Put it in your calendar and do it. We just coached a young lady earlier this week who says, I don't, I can't find the time to do these things and I don't feel that I deserve them. And my advice was put it in your calendar the same way you would put a meeting in your calendar and give it that high of an importance level. And someone taught me this years ago, and I have just started really using it in the last, especially with COVID. Oh my gosh. When you're at home more often than not, it's so easy that your whole life and your work life and your social life and your sleep time, it all blends into one never ending day that lasts 365 days. So I have become very intimate with my calendar. And I sit down usually on Sunday evenings with a glass of wine and I watch something mindless and I just put down how I want my week to look. I have meetings, clearly. I have things I have to do, but I schedule in some of the things we're talking about here. I schedule in Microsteps. I schedule in a 3 hours on a Friday afternoon to go hiking because I deserve that, right? I schedule in a call to an old friend. I think this is a way to start, right? We build habits through accountability. And this is a great way to hold yourself accountable. And you don't have to tell anybody. Don't share your calendar with anyone. They'll never know what you're putting in there. So
Or say, screw it. I don't care what you think. Maybe that's a better way,
right?
You let go of FOMO. Or as Michael Gervais says, FOPO. He likes to use FOPO, fear of people's opinions. Let it go. Live your life. And I'm going to go against Tara. You don't even need to hide it. Put it out there. Give the middle finger to people that don't.
Well,
like it.
I'll tell you, I haven't spent hardly any of my life caring what other people think, but I have a lot of friends that do.
What a lot of people do.
What a debilitating thing.
Social media is built on this.
Just get rid of it.
Built on comparison and built on what do people think of me. So I think that you got to be careful with that. I love everything you're saying here. You keep mentioning this Microsteps. Another book, if you want to check it out, one of the books that I have my students read is called Tiny Habits by Dr. B.J. Fogg. And he is, quite honestly...
he's amazing.
I think he's done a lot of the original research that maybe Ariana is actually kind of using in her book as well. But he's done a lot of the original research on this idea of make these habits small. Do little things instead of these big daunting things that Tara said earlier usually lead us to failure, and then we don't feel good about ourselves. So start small, do little things, find your success, you get empowered, and then grow from there. So I think Microsteps or tiny habits, whatever one you want to call it, all same deal. And I'm a big believer in it. Otherwise, I wouldn't assign it to my students. That's how much I think about that concept in that book. So that's some things that you can check out to get better at this. We threw a lot at you today. I hope some of it resonates with you and you find it valuable, useful. I know that our clients and certainly my students, and I think Tara would say the same, get a lot of value of these conversations that they're not always obvious. Especially the one about sleep. A lot of people don't realize it's such an active state and that we make better decisions when we have sleep. So some of these things may not be, obvious. And so hopefully we've taken you on a journey today to help you maybe think about behavioral change. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do here. And Tara and I have done many of these things. So we're not just throwing this out here as lip service. We actually act on all of these things, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think that's what we want to challenge you to act. At the end of the day, nothing changes if nothing changes, right? This is great. It's fun to listen to somebody that inspires us or motivates us, and then it just dies, right? And we do nothing with it. Whether it's a podcast or a TED Talk or whatever it is, maybe, It could be anything, right? We get all fired up and then it dies. It dies on the vine, and we need to water that plant, and we need to keep that alive and say, I'm going to make changes. I'm going to do something different because of what I heard on this podcast. So that's my challenge to you: is find one thing. Don't find 10. Find one thing from this podcast that you say, that makes sense. I want to try that. And I like to say, try it. If it doesn't work for you, that's great, but give it an honest chance. Don't give up after a day. I always like to say, give it a few weeks where you're actually very actively trying to change this. See what kind of benefits you get from it, because more than likely, I'm confident all the stuff we threw out there today, there's some things in there that you will find benefit in. There's no doubt in my mind. So try it, and that's how we change, and that's how we get better, and that's how we live a better life.
And we would love to dive deeper with you. Go to our website, which is forgingmetalpodcast.com, how to work with us. We'd love to work with you either one-on-one or in groups. We do a lot of group or teams, especially in corporations and businesses, bringing some of these discussions to light, right? Or if you want to do a deeper dive on what we've been talking about today, we actually extend out on June 10th what the discussion was today, working with stress, anxiety, and fear in order to live a better and more fulfilling life. And that's on June 10th. We'll throw that link to that event. It's a 3-hour workshop. We'll throw that in the show notes, and would love to see you there. But I love what you said, Ron. Start with one thing. Just make a commitment to one thing and do it for 30 days.
Make it small, get your microsteps, your tiny habits, and run with it. And let us know. We'd love to hear from you and say, how are things going? Reach out to us on social media and let us know how that journey's going as you learn mental toughness, resilience, and grit, and become just a better person because of that.